Hi everyone, welcome. I am Tomer Cohen. I'm working at Wix.com, currently leading the R&D security team. Me and my team are responsible for all the security aspects of all productions, operations, including the application, the infrastructure, incident response, and everything. And I'm here to talk about how to create a botnet by abusing Chrome extensions. And I want to start with my personal experience. So the first big challenge me and my team had with bots was on April 2016. It was a regular day in the office, and suddenly a dramatic increase in the new user sign-up event rate happened. So this basically means that a lot of users are signing up, a lot more than usual. And we started checking things, and we saw that all these requests are not originated in the same IP or even country. So we started to understand that we are coping with what we generally call a bot attack. Now, before we dive into the interesting part of this attack, a few words about bots. So, according to Imperva, the majority of the traffic in the internet today is done by bots. Most bots are bad bots, and most of the bad bots are impersonators. Impersonators are bots that fake user human behavior in websites, and they cause big headaches to internet companies because they blend into the website's regular traffic and make it very hard and do malicious stuff and make it very hard for the website to distinguish between the legit request and the bot request. So back to our attack, we started investigating deeper what is the origin of this request, and we found few patterns. So this is what we knew during the investigation of this attack. The first thing that we noticed is that most of the increase in the sign-up event is originated in Latin America countries. This was very weird because it was in high numbers, as well as most of the even almost all of the clients were coming with Chrome, with Google Chrome. Second things we've noticed that for some reason, and we did not know the reason at the time, the sign-up form used to send the sign-up request to our servers was in a frame inside a Facebook tab. There was a Facebook tab, and we saw that the requests are coming from a frame that is within the Facebook tab. We didn't understand, like I said, what it meant, but we'll see in a second why it was like this. Third thing that we saw, so a little intro about Wix. Wix is a website creation platform. Anyone on the internet can come, sign up, and create his own website for free. So what we've noticed is that there are a lot of users that sign up to a new account in Wix, and only 10 seconds after the sign-up event, we see that the user publishes a new Wix website. Now, this is weird because 10 seconds is obviously not enough to edit your website and then publish it. So this is the point when we got a good pattern, and we started to distinguish between the legit request of users and this bot request. And so we went and looked what were these websites about. And this is what we found. All the websites that were created this way in the 10th second pattern led to an attack page. Then this is in English. And what we see in here is a common scam attack page. It says that if you want to see who looked at your profile at Facebook, you can install a Chrome extension and see who viewed your profile. As a bonus, by the way, you can always see what is the meaning of your name if you want. But let's click on Start and see what we get. So we click on Start, and we do get to the real Google Chrome Web Store. Okay, this is the original Google Chrome Web Store, and it has an extension called Viad 30 something. We didn't recognize this extension, but we understood that this attack has to do with this extension. So we started investigating the extension and following the code. The code was highly obfuscated, and we had help from a lot of guys, including Perimeter X, which is a company that fights bots that we use. And this is what we found. Once the extension is installed, the first thing it does is inject code into Facebook tab. Now, Chrome extensions are, with proper permissions like this one have the ability to inject JavaScript code into tabs. So the first thing that this extension does is inject code into Facebook. Why Facebook? I guess because everyone is on Facebook all the time, and there are other reasons we'll see in a minute. Next thing it does, the code that is injected into the Facebook tab opens a Wix iframe. This is what we saw before. And this iframe is transparent. The victim user does not see anything, cannot notice anything. But the frame is leading to Wix sign-up form. Then from within the frame, an AJAX request is fired to Wix sign-up server. Now, one quick question. Why would the attacker even need to open a Wix iframe? I mean, he has the ability of an extension. He can just inject code into Facebook and then send the sign-up request to Wix from Facebook tab to Wix server. This is the extension is able to do it because it does not have the limitation of cross-origin requests of same origin. Sorry. Now the answer here is that it goes like this. We have basic or even more than basic bot detection system, and if the attacker just send the sign-up request just from any tab on the internet, it fails because this request does not have the proper cookies and headers and access tokens and things that we do in the sign-up form before the user comes to the sign-up endpoint. So this fails. However, so one small thing. The attacker wants to send the request to sign up to the sign up server from the page that runs the sign up form. But he don't want to open a new tab to the victim because this will be visible to the user. There are no invisible tabs in Chrome, so if you want to open a new tab, the user has to see it. So instead of that, the attacker just injected code into Facebook that creates an iframe of Wix sign-up form in the Facebook page. When the request is sent from within this, with this iframe, this succeeds. Now, I remind you that this iframe was entirely transparent, so the user did not notice anything, but his browser, his Facebook tab, sent a sign-up request to Wix, and it worked. Okay, let's go back to the extension curse of action. Go on with that. So we saw that it first inject code into Facebook, then open a Wix iframe, then send the sign-up request from within the frame. The next thing it does is, after signing up a new Wix user, it publishes a new website. Now, all the websites lead to one page that we saw before. This website has a newly created URL. And the extension then takes this URL and distributes the link, this URL, the attack page URL of the Wix website, among all Facebook friends of the victim using Facebook messaging. The last thing that this extension does after this distribution phase is using the victim's Google authorization token. It submits a review of 5 stars in Google Web Store of the malicious extension. Okay, cool. So this is what the extension did. But my question here is, why would the attacker even need weeks in this campaign? I mean, can't he just inject code to Facebook and then distribute his link to his attack page to the friends of the victims? Why would he need weeks on the way? So the answer here is that Wix was used to distribute a malware, and the whole role of Wix in this campaign was to supply disposable URLs. Okay, the attacker did not want to send all the victims the same URL of his server, his attack server, because it's easier. This way, it's easier for Facebook to detect and block this attack. Every victim opened a new account in Wix and created a new website and sent the new URL to his friends, and then the attack was fully distributed. Okay, so what we've been described so far is obviously only the infection phase of this attack. Obviously, after the infection, these bots are used to gain one thing, and you guessed right, it's money. So bot masters do with their botnets a lot of things you're all familiar with, I guess. They send spam from it, they run DDoS attacks, scrape websites, run click frauds, and they make money out of it. The more bots that they have, they make more money. Of course, they can also put these bots for rent and get money for doing these operations for other people. Or on top of that, you can always steal personal information or sensitive information from the victims and lateral move through their networks. So this is what they do after the infection phase, after the campaign of the infection. And I'm here to talk about the infection phase. And I want to show you another example that happened just 2 months later. June 2016. So in April, we struggled with these attack actors for a while, and in the end, we blocked them. But 2 months later, a new attack came to our knowledge. It was in the news, and it said that a Facebook comment tagging malware is spreading via Google Chrome. And the warning is, if you receive a Facebook notification regarding a friend tagging you in a comment, be very careful, because it can be a malware. Now, this attack was named Tag Me If You Can by Idon Naor, is a researcher in Kaspersky Labs. And he published a very detailed report about this attack. And the thing is that when I saw Idon's report on this attack, I knew this was the same attackers that attacked us 2 months before. How did I know it? You'll see in a second. Let's see how this attack worked. So the first thing that the victim see is a notification on Facebook that a friend of his has tagged him in a comment. Upon clicking this comment, after a short Facebook warning that you are getting out of Facebook, a JSE file is immediately downloaded to the victim's browser. Now, a JSE file acts as an executable on all Windows machines. And if I'm going to the next step and I'm clicking this JSE file, and the malware runs on my machine. So what it does, this malware, firstly it causes Chrome to crash. Then it creates a copy of Chrome exe file, just with a little addition, a malicious extension installed on the new Chrome process. Then when Chrome is reopened, the extension runs and does 2 simple things. The first, it uploads a new JSE file to the victim's Google Drive. using the Google authorization token. The next thing it does, it takes the URL. But one little more thing. It makes this file public to everyone, so other victims could get this URL of the JSE file and access it. So after that, it takes the URL of the JSE file uploaded to Google Drive and distribute it and using a Facebook commenting plugin. Like as we saw before, what it does, it creates a comment with a tag of all these friends that lead to the newly created JSE file in the victim's Google Drive. Is that clear? Cool. So one of the victim's friends on Facebook clicks on this notification, and the whole thing runs over and over again, and we got an exponential growth infection process. You must be asking yourselves, how did these attackers create a notification that lead to a download of a JSE file? So this is very interesting, but it's too long for this talk. You can find more details in the white paper of this presentation, or in Idona Orr's report in more details about this attack. Tag me if you can. Very interesting. So we saw two attacks. I promised to tell you how I knew that it were the same attackers. So the extensions that were used in both attacks were very similar. They used mutual code snippets, code parts, and also used in some cases the same domains belonging to these attackers. This is how we knew for sure that it's the same attackers. Now in these two attacks that we saw, there's a pattern. Okay, this is how it goes. This is also how I recognize that it was the same attackers. It always starts with a user clicking. In the first attack, it was user clicking on a Facebook message. On a second attack, it was a notification. Then somehow, an extension, a malicious Chrome extension, is installed on his browser. In the first attack, it was the user had to install it from the web store. In the second attack, an executable, the JSE file, installed this extension. Next thing, the extension runs and create a new malicious payload instance. In the Wix attack, it was a new Wix website that offers you to install the extension. In the second attack, it was a JSE file uploaded to the user's Google Drive. Then it always takes the URL of the newly created payload instance and send it somehow to all Facebook friends of the victim. It can be with messages or notifications. As we saw before, one of the victim's friends click, and then the whole thing runs over and over again. Now, the companies abused in these two campaigns we reviewed are not minor companies, right? We're talking about Facebook, Google, Wix.com, and the three of them, this magical bot somehow comes and defeats the bot detection systems of all these companies. All the services that we were discussing, upload a file to Google Drive, send Facebook messages, it all have bot protection mechanisms on them. So why do common bots fail to bypass this protection and this bot succeeds? So let's have a second to analyze what makes a good bot. So the goal of a good bot is to look as human as he can, right? A good bot will want website to think that he's a human that is sitting on his computer and surfing the internet using his browser, right? So, and how do popular bot protection techniques work? Okay, the first thing that bot protection mechanisms challenge bots with is JavaScript. Most bots today run JavaScript, but you can always create a tailor-made JavaScript calculation to a client depending on his version of the version that he claims he is. For example, if I'm claiming that I'm running Chrome in some version, there are specific JavaScript challenges that can be given to this client, and if he's not a real Chrome browser, the odds are that he will not succeed. Now, this problem is solved in our case, right? Because our extension is running as our bot is running as a Chrome extension, which runs inside Chrome. So you can give this bot whatever JavaScript challenges that you want. He will cope with it successfully. The second thing is what I like to call human context. So this includes a lot of stuff. For example, mouse movement and keystrokes, and all the human behavior that involves when you surf the internet. In addition, it also the user context here is very important. As we saw in Wix, if you there's a flow of events that should happen when a user, for instance, signing up to a website. First, he has to go through the sign-up form, and only then he can send the sign-up request. So this bot needs to somehow get into context of a real user. Now, the best way to get into a context of a user is to inject JavaScript code into the user's active tabs, right? If I'm able to put my code into the user's real active tabs that he works with, for example, Facebook, I can get his context with the site. And this is actually what browser extensions are all about. Getting the context of the user, injecting JavaScript into active tabs. Now, if you ask yourselves, how did Facebook and Google not block this attack or block extensions from doing these operations? The answer is that it's not a bug, it's a feature. If you think about it, extensions should be able to do all this kind of stuff, to send Facebook messages and upload the file to Google Drive, and actually anything else that people want to have on the internet with Chrome, with extensions. So this makes bots that run on browser extensions a very powerful tool. Let's have a second to see to understand the full capabilities of an extension. Let's have a second to see to review the manifest file of the extension that we saw before attacking Wix. So in the red frame, you can see the name of the extension, via Unlocker. These attackers used a name of an already existing extension that was already in the store. I guess they figured out that it's easier that way to pass Google's screening process in the web store. So what we see here, and this is the most important part of the manifest, it has a permission to fire cross-origin requests to any destination he wants on the internet. This also allows this extension to inject JavaScript code into any tab that the user is using. What else? We have access to all user cookies in all tabs. That, by the way, includes also HTTP-only cookies. Next thing we see is that the extension has a background script. Background script runs in the background once the extension is installed. And let's have a look at that script. What we see here. So this background script is actually the command and control system of the attacker. I'll explain. Let's see what it does. So first, every time it adds a listener that is triggered every time a tab is updated, any change on any tab. And then it goes to a server belonging to the attacker. This is what you see here, and gets a file called data.js, which is the commands file to this bot from the attacker server. Then it takes this data.js script from the attacker servers and using the Chrome API Chrome API tabs.execute script, it runs it on the active tab. So this actually make this bot not static. I mean, the attacker is able to adjust his attack all the time. He can always change the commands file that is served to his bots. He can also create a commands file specifically for every domain that is updated. For example, I want to send messages on Facebook, and I want to upload. If I'm on Google, I want to upload the file or whatever. This is a very powerful thing because it allows the attacker to change his attack according to what happens. For example, I told you before that we saw that there are users that only 10 seconds after the sign up, they publish a site. So we said to ourselves, okay, that's easy. Let's just unpublish websites that are published only less than 20 seconds after the sign-up event. And we started unpublish this website, and the attack stopped for about half an hour. And then the attacker just changed the commands file to like have a randomized timeout between the sign-up event and the publish website event. All these makes browser extension the perfect bot. It can cope with any JavaScript challenge. It can inject code in the context of the user. The thing is that it's just too much work, right? I mean, these campaigns required much effort from these attackers to run. They had to, if you want to distribute your own malicious extension, you have to somehow pass the screening process of Google Web Store and smuggle your malicious extension into the store. After that, you have to somehow persuade and convince victim users to install this extension. Or, on the other hand, which is complicated as well, somehow run executable on these victims. Also, if your malicious extension is in the Google Web Store, once your extension is revealed as a malicious, Google remotely uninstalls your extension from all connected devices. So you lose all the bots that you collected. So how can we make it easier? The thing is that to get the abilities of an extension, we don't necessarily have to create and distribute our own malicious extension. If we just had the ability to run JavaScript in the context of Chrome extensions, that will be enough, right? Okay, running JavaScript in the context of web application, I know, XSS. So instead of explaining the difference between XSS in web pages and extensions, let's just have a look at some recent examples. The first example I want to show here is the Adobe Acrobat extension XSS. Now, this extension aims to allow users to convert any web page into a PDF file. On January 16, while it had 30 million installations, by the way, Adobe installed it automatically without users' awareness on all devices that had Adobe Acrobat Reader on it. That's why it got so many users, 30 million users. Just for proportions, the Mirai bot attack, that was the largest attack, the bot attack that was noticed, is estimated to be tens of millions of devices. Okay? So it's the same numbers, more or less. So on January 16, while it had 30 million installations, a researcher from Google Project Zero, Tavis Ormandy, reported this extension is vulnerable to DOM-based XSS. Now, this is Tavis's report. I know that you don't see a lot of it, but it included POC code. We can see that the vulnerability lies in an extension page called frame.html, and our payload is here inside a parameter called message. And if we put HTML here, this runs on the extension page. Now, this vulnerability almost allowed universal XSS, but it didn't, at least from what I tried. Why? So let's see where the vulnerability is. It's pretty straightforward. Here's how our payload in request.message, it gets into str status, and then str status gets into the raw HTML of the title of this page. So that's really a common, easy, trivial case of XSS. It's so trivial that actually Google CSP, Content Security Policy, blocks JavaScript execution in this case. Now, Tavis Ormandy in his report mentioned that there's a way to pivot that to code execution, but I didn't invest too much effort on that. I'll show you other examples. The thing is that there's nothing new here. Okay, what I'm showing, the XSS on extensions, it's something that Mr. Kotowitz and Osborne already shown here in Black Hat on 2012. So I wanted to say that the topic here is not XSS on extensions. It's how to create a botnet abusing these extensions. One addition is that there is something that was changed since 2012, and this is the content security policy of Chrome extensions. Since 2014, Google enforced a default CSP content security policy on all the extensions. This prevents a lot of trivial, common Java code injections, including this case of Adobe. For example, it prevents inline scripts and it prevents eval functions. So it prevents common JavaScript injections. Now, this was, in my opinion, a very important move from Google's side, because before that, there were a lot of cross-site scripting vulnerabilities in a lot of extensions. And this, while it made a lot of work for extension developers, because they have to take all their buggy inline scripts into the extension, I think it saved us from an extension XSS horror scenario. And I wanted to show you that because the thing is that CSP is not enough. It's a generic policy, the default CSP, and thinking that a generic policy will cover all the cases is wrong. And let's see an example. Let's move to the next example, which is the AVG Web Tune-Up extension. This extension aims to protect users' browser, but on December 2015, while it had 9 million installations, the same guy, Mr. Tavis Ormandy, found this extension to be vulnerable, to have several critical vulnerabilities, including XSS. In this case, CSP did not work, and I will show how. I'll show why. This is Tavis' report. The hilarious thing here is his signature. Disappointed, Tavis. Tavis, if you're here, you're my hero. I mean, this is an extension that aims to protect users, and it actually made all these browser and all these users hackable in several ways. So I'm going to run a little demo of this XSS that allowed. It's a universal XSS, meaning that you can inject code on victims that run this extension to any tab, to any domain. Let's have a quick look. Cool. So what we see here is the exploitation POC code. It's basically the POC code by Mr. Ormandy with some adjustments that I added. Actually, let's look on this file, which is similar. What we see here is that there's a loop that sends post window messages with the message. Now, if you pay closer attention, you can see that the message is sent to the window of the attack page itself. This is the attack page, okay? This is the page that I'm going to send victims in order to attack them. Now, the attack page sends a post message to the same window it runs on, okay? So this is weird because we are sending a message to our own window. The thing is that the extension also injects content script into our attack page because it injects the script to just any page. And for some reason, it also listens to these messages, okay? We'll see it in a second in the extension code, but what I wanted to show here is that inside this message, I indicate an action that I call navigate, and I give also data. In the data, I give a URL. The URL is a JavaScript colon URL that runs this script on the active tab. Now, just for explaining it, the navigate action causes the extension to update a tab, an open tab, with our URL, to navigate to our URL. And our URL is the JavaScript code. You can see that there's a for loop that you can notice that there is a tab ID here, and I'm going to send 3,000 messages like this with all the tab IDs of all my tabs. And in these tabs, I'm going to check if it runs on blackhat.com. If it runs on blackhat.com, if it's a blackhat.com tab, I'm going to inject the Beef framework code in order to gain control over this tab. Just a quick look at the code of the extension. So what we see here is this is the backend script of the extension. You can see that there's a function called navigate, and it takes our message. Here is our message, the data of the message, and run this function navigate. And this function, in turn, you can see it here, uses Chrome API tabs update in order to update the tab ID that we chose to the URL that we chose here. This is the URL. So why? Let's run it and then we explain why CSP is not effective here. Okay, so I have a Blackhat page. I'm going to refresh it to show you that everything is normal. And let's turn on the AVG web tune-up. The vulnerable version of this extension now is on. And I'm also going to delete this. This is Beef. I'm going to delete this zombie. By the way, this is our attack page, okay, that we just saw. This is the code that we just saw. And you can see that after injecting the Beef script, it also alerts that we have a hook. So we've got the Blackhat window here. You see there are no online browser in Beef. And now I'm going to refresh this page. And as you see, we've got an alert. I injected code to Black Hat without any vulnerability on Black Hat, okay? Just by abusing this extension. You can also see that now the beef JavaScript is injected into the page, and the beef requests are starting to run. And we can see that in beef we have a new hooked browser, a hooked tab. Now the thing is that attackers can use these vulnerable extensions in order to run campaigns just like the ones that we saw earlier. If I gain control over Gmail and Facebook, which I will show in a second, I can send my payload, my attack page, which is the attack page that we saw, to other victims using Facebook, and distribute my payload effectively through social networks in order to create my botnet, my Chrome extensions botnet. Just a quick example from beef. You can do something like this, a fake notification bar on the page, and just 1 second. And what the victim will see is something like that. Additional plugins required to display this page, and if you click it, a JSE file is downloaded, and then in this example, it's a JSE file that can act like the JSE file that we saw in the tag-me-if-you-can attack. Thank you. The last thing I want to show here is how I inject code also to Facebook and Google, in this case Google Drive. This is another file, very similar. What it does, it checks if I'm on Facebook or Google, and then just write that we have XSS on the domain. Let's run it. And you can see that we've got XSS on Facebook and Google Drive. Okay. Getting back to the presentation. Great. So why is CSP not blocking this kind of XSS? The reason here is that there is no generic JavaScript injection here. There's no inline script. There is no eval. Okay. All we do is sending a post message to our own window, and the extension listens in the code that it injects to our window to these messages, and then pass it to the background script of the extension. Now the background script has the ability to update tabs, and I just update the URL of the tab. So I'm not even injecting. It's not the application that injects the code is not the page itself. Is the background script of the extension that is able to control the tabs because it has permissions. One small example I want to also show is JSON View. How many in the room have this extension installed or had it in the past? Okay, great. There are a lot of people with this extension, and it was for a year and a half since February 2015 till November 2016, it was vulnerable to XSS, and no one. There were reports by Mr. Joe Venix on this XSS, and no one repaired it. A quick demonstration. Is this. So let's open enable the JSON View extension. You can see here that there's a page on Wix.com which has a category that I put input here, and this is the input. You can see this is the input, and the thing here is that a lot of websites, including Wix, take input and make and generate a JSON file out of it. So this is the JSON file that contains my input, and if I run it, I can see that I have an XSS. So, and this example is very different from the first one that I showed you, and CSP does not block it as well. Great. 1 second. Okay, I think I'm finished. It's time for questions. Thank you.